Tonight, as the world quiets around you, we turn toward teachings that have illuminated the darkness for countless generations. The Buddha spoke to the human condition with such clarity and compassion that his words still reach across the centuries to touch your heart right now. Welcome. You found your way to Buddha Bedtime Stories, a sanctuary where wisdom and rest intertwine, where ancient paths lead you home to yourself. I'd love to hear, what time is it where you are, and where are you listening from tonight? Please let me know in the comments below. What we'll explore together isn't meant to add to your burden of things to learn or practice. These stories exist to lighten your load, to show you that peace isn't as far away as you might think, that rest is always available when you stop fighting and start allowing. The Buddha's gift was showing us how to be with what is, rather than exhausting ourselves wishing for what isn't. Tonight, that gift is yours. Let the teachings move through you without resistance. Some will resonate immediately. Others will plant seeds that bloom later. All of it is exactly as it should be. Take this moment to truly settle. Notice where you're holding tension and consciously soften those places. Let your body be held completely by whatever supports you. Draw in a deep cleansing breath. Hold it for a heartbeat, then release it with a soft sigh, letting everything go. Once more, breathing in this present moment, breathing out everything else. Beautiful. Let us begin our first story together. In a village where bread was the staple food, there lived a baker named Tomoe, who had learned the craft from her mother and grandmother. She took great pride in her work, waking before dawn each day to prepare dough, tend the oven, and produce loaves that the village depended on. Tomoe had baked thousands of loaves over the years, and she rarely made mistakes anymore. Her hands knew the feel of properly kneaded dough. Her eyes could judge oven temperature by the color of the fire. Her timing was precise. Day after day, she produced bread that was consistently good, reliable, exactly what people expected. But one morning, something went wrong. A neighbor had stopped by to talk just as Tomoe was loading loaves into the oven. Distracted by the conversation, she forgot about the bread. By the time she remembered, smoke was pouring from the oven. She pulled out loaf after loaf of burnt bread, each one blackened and ruined. Tomoe was devastated. In 15 years of baking, she had never destroyed an entire day's batch. The waste of ingredients troubled her. The loss of income for the day worried her. But most of all, her pride was wounded. She had been perfect for so long, and now she had failed in the most basic way. She sat among the burnt loaves, feeling terrible. Her young apprentice, a girl named Kiku, came in and saw the disaster. "What happened?" Kiku asked. "I forgot," Tomoe said miserably. "I was distracted and I forgot. After 15 years of baking, I made a beginner's mistake." Kiku picked up one of the burnt loaves, examining it. "So this is what happens when bread stays in the oven too long." "Yes, it's completely ruined, worthless." But Kiku was looking at it with fascination. She had been apprenticing for 6 months and had never seen burnt bread before. Tomoe was so skilled that mistakes never happened in her presence. "How much too long was it in there?" Kiku asked. Tomoe thought. "Perhaps 10 minutes passed when I should have removed it." And what if it had been 5 minutes too long instead of 10? Tomoe considered this. She had actually never experimented with deliberately over-baking bread, so she wasn't certain. I suppose it would be burnt, but less severely. Could it still be eaten if it were only 5 minutes over? Perhaps if you cut away the worst parts. Kiku set down the burnt loaf and picked up another. And this one is burnt differently than that one. Why? Tomo looked more carefully at the loaves she had been too upset to really examine. Kiku was right. They had been in different parts of the oven, so they had burnt in different ways. Some were charred uniformly. Others were only burnt on one side. Some had burnt crusts but soft interiors. Each loaf told a story about where it had been in the oven and how fire had affected it. "I've been baking for 6 months," Kiku said, "and I've only learned how to do things right. I've never learned what happens when things go wrong, but you just learned more in one mistake than I've learned in weeks of getting it right." Tomo looked at her young apprentice with new appreciation. The girl had wisdom beyond her years. "You're right," Tomo said slowly. "I've been so focused on perfection that I've stopped learning. Every loaf I bake comes out the same. I'm not growing or discovering anything new. I'm just repeating what I already know how to do." She stood up and examined the burnt loaves more systematically. "This one," she said, pointing, "was at the back of the oven where it's hottest. It burnt fastest. These along the side got less direct heat. They took longer to burn. And this one right in front, it actually caught fire briefly before I pulled it out." Kiku watched her teacher transform from defeated to curious, from ashamed to engaged. "You know what?" Tomo said. "I'm going to deliberately burn some bread. Different amounts, different positions in the oven, different types of dough. I'm going to learn what I don't know because I've been too careful to ever make these mistakes." Over the following weeks, Tomo conducted experiments that would have horrified her former perfectionist self. She deliberately overbaked loaves to see what happened. She underbaked some. She tried different temperatures, different positions in the oven, different lengths of time. She made every mistake she could think of, carefully observing the results. What she learned transformed her baking. She discovered that what she had called perfect was actually just one point on a spectrum of possibilities. She found that slightly underbaked bread had a chewier texture that some people preferred. She learned that bread with a darker crust had a richer flavor. She discovered techniques she never would have tried if she hadn't been forced out of her perfect routine by that first mistake. Her bread became more varied, more interesting, more responsive to what different customers wanted. People who had been eating her consistently good bread for years suddenly found themselves excited by it again. "What changed?" they would ask. "Your bread seems different lately." Tomo would smile and say, "I finally made a mistake. And that mistake taught me more than years of getting it right." One day, a traveling baker who was considered a master of the craft stopped at Tomo's shop. He tasted her bread and was impressed. "You understand bread deeply," he said. "How did you learn so much?" "I burnt a whole day's batch," Tomo replied, "and instead of just feeling bad about it, I decided to learn from it. That mistake opened doors I didn't even know existed." The master baker nodded knowingly. The problem with being good at something is that you stop making mistakes. And when you stop making mistakes, you stop learning. You just keep repeating what you already know. It's the mistakes, if you pay attention to them, that show you what you don't yet understand. He looked around at her thriving shop. People think mastery means never making mistakes, but real mastery comes from making mistakes consciously, learning from them, and letting them teach you what success never can. Years later, when Kiku had become a skilled baker herself and taken over Tomoe's shop, she would tell new apprentices about the day of the burnt bread. "My teacher was perfect for 15 years, she would say, and in those 15 years, her skill barely grew. But one mistake, one moment of failure, opened up years of new learning. Don't fear mistakes. Pay attention to them. They're often more valuable teachers than success." Tonight, as you rest, you might consider your own burnt bread, the mistakes you've made, the failures you've experienced, the times things went wrong. Are you still punishing yourself for these mistakes? Still seeing them only as evidence of inadequacy? What if those mistakes were actually your best teachers? What if failure, when you pay attention to it, reveals possibilities that success keeps hidden? What if the things you did wrong showed you more than all the things you did right? You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to get everything right. Sometimes the most valuable thing you can do is make a mistake, pay attention to what happens, and let it teach you what you couldn't learn any other way. Rest now in acceptance of your imperfect humanity. Your mistakes are not failures. They're experiments. They're lessons. They're the burnt bread that teaches you something new about the oven of your own life. Let them nourish your wisdom instead of poisoning your peace. In a city famous for its artists, there was a renowned sculptor named Kaori who had created magnificent works for temples, palaces, and public squares throughout the land. She was known for her perfectionism, her unwillingness to declare any work complete until every detail was exactly right. At age 60, Kaori received a commission that she knew would be her masterpiece, a memorial sculpture for the city's founder. She had complete artistic freedom and unlimited time. This would be her legacy, the work by which all her other work would be judged. She began with intense focus, creating preliminary sketches, building models, and selecting the perfect stone. The first year was spent in planning. The second year is spent roughing out the basic form. By the third year, the sculpture was recognizably taking shape as a figure of dignity and strength, capturing something essential about leadership and vision. But as the sculpture neared completion, something strange happened. Kaori couldn't finish it. Every time she thought she was done, she would see another adjustment to make, another detail to refine, another element that wasn't quite right. The nose could be more precise, the hands could be more expressive, the drapery could flow more naturally. Years passed. The sculpture stood in her studio, nearly complete, but never quite complete enough. City officials would visit, would ask when they might see the finished work, and Kaori would assure them it was almost ready, just a few more refinements needed. 10 years after beginning the project, Kaori was still working on the same sculpture. It had gone through countless iterations. Areas she had refined years earlier, she would redo, claiming her skills had improved, and she could do better now. The sculpture had become an obsession, a project that consumed her life but never reached completion. A young sculptor named Isamu, who admired Kaori's earlier work, came to apprentice with her. He expected to learn from watching a master complete her masterpiece. Instead, he found an old woman trapped in endless refinement, unable to stop working on a sculpture that had been nearly done for years. "Why don't you declare it finished?" Isamu finally asked, after watching Kaori rework the same hand for the third time since he arrived. "Because it's not perfect yet," Kaori replied. "I can see the ideal form in my mind. This stone version still falls short. I need to keep working until the stone matches the vision." "But will it ever match?" Isamu asked gently. "Will the real sculpture ever match the perfect one in your imagination?" Kaori had no answer. She had never asked herself this question. She had always assumed that with enough work, enough refinement, enough time, she could make the physical sculpture match her mental ideal. A Zen teacher named Etsuko, who had known Kaori for decades, visited the studio. She looked at the nearly complete sculpture with a sad expression. "You're destroying it," Etsuko said. "I'm perfecting it," Kaori protested. "No, you're overworking it. The sculpture lost its life years ago when you couldn't stop refining it. Now it's becoming tight, over-controlled, anxious. I can see your perfectionism in every surface. The early spontaneity is gone, replaced by compulsive detail." She touched the sculpture gently. Completion doesn't mean achieving perfection. It means recognizing when continuing diminishes rather than improves. This sculpture was probably finished 5 years ago, but you couldn't see it because you were comparing it to an impossible ideal rather than accepting it as the real thing it actually was. Kaori wanted to argue, but she knew Etsuko was right. She looked at her sculpture with honest eyes for the first time in years. It was beautiful in parts, overworked in others. The areas she had refined most recently were actually worse than earlier versions. Too controlled, too fussy, too perfect. The sculpture had lost its breath somewhere along the way. "How do I know when something is done?" Kaori asked quietly. "How do I distinguish between stopping because it's complete and stopping because I've given up?" "You feel it," Etsuko replied. "True completion has a quality of rightness, even if the work isn't perfect. Giving up has a quality of defeat. But what you're doing now is neither completion nor giving up. It's compulsive continuation, working past the point where work helps. That's different from both completion and abandonment." She looked at Kaori directly. The sculpture should have been installed in the city square years ago, where people would appreciate it. Instead, it's trapped in your studio, being endlessly refined toward an ideal it will never reach. You're preventing it from serving its purpose because you can't accept that it's good enough. That's not dedication to excellence. That's fear disguised as perfectionism. This truth landed hard. Kaori realized she had been afraid to finish the sculpture, afraid to have it judged, afraid it wouldn't live up to her reputation. As long as it remained unfinished in her studio, it remained perfect in potential. Once completed and installed, it would be real, subject to criticism, limited by its actual qualities rather than protected by its imagined ones. "I've been hiding," Kaori admitted, calling it refinement when actually it was avoidance. With Etsuko's help, Kaori looked at the sculpture one more time and made a decision. She declared it complete as it was, not perfect, but real. She stopped working on it and arranged for its installation. When the sculpture was finally revealed in the city square, public response was mixed. Some people loved it, Others thought it was good, but not as exceptional as they'd expected from a decade of work. Critics noted both its strengths and its weaknesses. It was not a perfect masterpiece. It was a good sculpture with both beautiful passages and overworked areas, a real work rather than an ideal one. And Kaori found unexpected peace in this. The sculpture was done, installed, serving its purpose. It wasn't perfect, but it was complete. It had moved from endless potential to limited actuality, and this movement was itself a kind of perfection. Not the perfection of flawless execution, but the perfection of genuine completion. I spent 10 years trying to make it perfect, Kaori told Isamu, standing together, looking at the installed sculpture. I should have spent 3 years making it good, and then accepted that good was enough. The extra 7 years didn't make it better, they just delayed it. Isamu asked, "But how will you know with your next work? How will you know when to stop?" "I'll try to recognize when I'm working from love versus working from fear," Kaori said. "When I'm working from love, I'm responding to the actual piece, helping it become itself. When I'm working from fear, I'm trying to make it match an impossible ideal, trying to protect myself from criticism or judgment. The work from fear doesn't improve the piece. It just makes it tighter, more controlled, more dead." She touched a rough area of the sculpture that she had always intended to smooth further. "See this? For years I planned to refine it, but now I see it gives texture, life, contrast. My perfectionism wanted to eliminate it, but actually it's one of the better parts. Sometimes what we think is incomplete is actually just real, and real includes roughness, includes elements that don't match the ideal." In her remaining years, Kaori created several more sculptures, and each one she completed more quickly than the last. She learned to recognize the moment when a work was done, not perfect, but complete. She learned that completion meant allowing the work to be what it actually was, rather than endlessly pushing it toward what it might ideally be. "My final work taught me that sometimes completion means stopping, not finishing," she told students. "Sometimes good enough is actually excellent, because continuing would diminish rather than improve. Sometimes the work is done when you can let it go, not when it's perfect." Tonight, as you rest, you might consider what in your life needs completion rather than more refinement. What projects, relationships, phases, identities have you been endlessly working on, unable to declare them finished because they don't match your ideal? What would it mean to accept them as complete, as good enough, as done? Completion doesn't require perfection. It requires recognition that continuing is no longer serving the work or serving you. It requires courage to let the real thing exist, rather than protecting the imagined perfect thing by keeping it perpetually incomplete. Rest now in completion. Let yourself be done with some things, not because they're perfect, but because they're finished. Let yourself stop refining and start living with what actually is, rather than what might ideally be. The sculptor's final work teaches that holding on too long destroys as surely as letting go too early. Learn to recognize the difference, and then, when it's time, let go. As we continue our journey through the wisdom of Zen Buddhism, let us turn to a tale about recognition and the true nature of worth. This is the next story. In a mountain monastery, there was a pond that perfectly reflected the sky above it. At night, when the moon was full, there would appear to be two moons, one in the sky and one in the water. A young monk named Daiki was troubled by this. "Which is the real moon?" he would ask. "The one in the sky or the one in the water?" The other monks would laugh. "Obviously, the one in the sky is real. The one in the water is just a reflection." But Daiki wasn't satisfied with this answer. He would sit by the pond for hours, watching both moons. The moon in the water was just as bright, just as beautiful, just as present to his vision as the moon in the sky. In what sense was it less real? He asked his teacher, Master Hakuin, "If I can see the moon in the water, if it affects me just as much as the moon in the sky, how is it not real?" Hakuin smiled. "Touch the moon in the sky." "I can't. It's too far away." "Touch the moon in the water!" Daiki reached toward the pond, but as his hand approached the water, the moon's reflection rippled and fragmented. "I can't touch that one either." "Then in what way is one more real than the other?" Hakuin asked. "Both exist in your experience. Both affect you. Both are impossible to grasp. What makes you think reality and reflection are different things?" This question opened something in Daiki's understanding. He had been taught to distinguish between real and reflected, original and copy, substance and shadow. But his experience didn't support these neat distinctions. When he looked at the moon in the water, he really saw it. The experience of seeing it was real, even if what he was seeing was a reflection. When he felt moved by its beauty, the emotion was real, regardless of whether he was looking at the original or the reflection. His life, his experience, his feelings, all of these were happening in response to both moons equally. He began to wonder about other reflections in his life. When he thought about his deceased mother, was he experiencing his actual mother, or just a memory, a reflection of who she had been? Yet his love for her was real. His grief was real. The way she had shaped him was real. Did it matter that he could only access a reflection of her, not her actual presence? When he read teachings from ancient masters, was he experiencing their actual wisdom or just reflections of it, filtered through translation and time and his own interpretation? Yet the teachings affected him, changed him, helped him. The reflections had real power. When he practiced meditation and caught glimpses of what the teachings called his true nature, was he experiencing the actual thing or just reflections of it in his limited consciousness? Yet whatever he was experiencing, it was transforming his life. One evening, Daiki sat by the pond with Master Hakuin, watching the two moons. "Master," Daiki said, "I think I've been making a mistake. I've been trying to distinguish between the real and the reflected, but everything I experience is in some sense a reflection. I never touch reality directly. I only experience reflections of it in my consciousness, interpretations of it through my senses, and understanding. If I dismiss all reflections as unreal, I dismiss my entire life." Hakuin nodded. "This is a good understanding. The question isn't whether something is real or reflected. The question is whether you're aware that you're looking at a reflection, or whether you mistake the reflection for the only reality." He pointed at the moon in the water. "The danger isn't in seeing this moon. The danger is in thinking this is the only moon, in believing that your reflection of reality is reality itself. But if you know you're seeing a reflection, if you remain aware that there's something beyond what you can directly experience, then the reflection serves its purpose. It points you toward what it reflects. Over the following months, Daiki deepened this understanding. He learned to appreciate reflections without mistaking them for the whole truth. He could love his memory of his mother while knowing it was a reflection of her, not her actual presence. He could value teachings while knowing they were fingers pointing at truth, not truth itself. He could work with his experiences in meditation while knowing they were reflections of his true nature, not the full reality of it. He found this understanding incredibly freeing. He no longer needed to grasp the ungraspable or fully understand the incomprehensible. He could work with reflections, learn from them, be transformed by them, without needing them to be more than what they were. One day, a new student came to the monastery and asked Daiki the same question he had once asked. Which moon is real? The one in the sky, or the one in the water? Daiki smiled, remembering his own confusion. Both are real, he replied. One is the original, one is the reflection. But your experience of both is real. The light from the sky moon and the light from the water moon both enter your eyes. Both create responses in your consciousness. Both affect you. The only difference is that you can't directly touch either one, and one will remain even if you disturb the water. He looked at the two moons thoughtfully. Most of what we call our life is reflection. Reflection of the past in memory. Reflection of reality in consciousness. Reflection of truth in words and concepts. We live in a world of reflections. This isn't a problem unless we forget that they're reflections. Then we start fighting about whose reflection is most accurate, claiming our interpretation is the only real one, trying to grasp what can't be grasped. The new student asked, "So, how should we relate to reflections?" "Appreciate them," Daiki replied. "Learn from them. Be transformed by them, but hold them lightly. Know that they point to something beyond themselves. The moon in the water shows you where to look for the moon in the sky. Your experiences point you toward the truth beyond experience. Your understanding reflects reality, but isn't identical to reality. This awareness keeps you humble and keeps you seeking." Years later, when Daiki became a teacher, he would often bring students to the pond on full moon nights. He would have them look at both moons and ask, "Which is real?" Some students would confidently say the sky moon was real and the water moon was just a reflection. Daiki would ask them, "Then why can you see them both equally well? Why does the water moon move you just as much as the sky moon?" Other students, trying to be clever, would say both were real. Daiki would ask them, "Then why does one remain when you throw a stone in the water and the other doesn't?" A few students would grow quiet, realizing the question itself was based on assumptions that didn't hold up under examination. These were the students Daiki knew were ready for deeper teaching. The question which is real assumes reality and reflection are opposites, he would tell these students. But actually, reflection is a form of reality. It's a real reflection, a real experience, a real perception. The problem isn't with reflection itself. The problem is when we mistake partial reflection for complete reality. When we think our limited experience encompasses the whole truth. When we cling to our interpretations as if they were the things themselves. He would point at the two moons. Your life is like looking at these moons. You're always experiencing reflections, never the thing itself. You reflect reality through your senses, your consciousness, your understanding. This reflection is a real experience. It shapes you, teaches you, transforms you. But it's not the whole story. Stay aware of this. Appreciate your reflections. Learn from them. But don't mistake them for the unreflected reality. One student asked, "Will we ever experience unreflected reality? Will we ever see beyond reflection?" Daiki was quiet for a long moment, then said, "Perhaps in death, perhaps in enlightenment, perhaps never. I don't know, but I know this. The effort to see beyond reflection is itself valuable. The awareness that we're experiencing reflection keeps us humble, keeps us seeking, keeps us from absolutizing our limited perspectives. And sometimes in rare moments of clarity, the reflection becomes so perfect, so transparent, that the distinction between reflected and unreflected almost disappears. Those moments of clarity are themselves gifts of the reflective nature of consciousness. Tonight, as you rest, you might consider that your entire experience right now is a reflection. These words are reflections of ideas. Your understanding of them is a reflection of the words. Your sense of yourself is a reflection of something deeper. Your thoughts are reflections of the underlying mental activity you don't directly experience. Everything you know comes to you as a reflection. This doesn't make your experience less real. It makes it what it is, a real experience of reflected reality. You're seeing the moon in the water, and that seeing is genuine, even if what you're seeing is a reflection. Let this understanding help you hold everything a bit more lightly tonight. Your worries are reflections of possible futures. Your regrets are reflections of the past. Your sense of who you are is a reflection of something deeper and more mysterious than you can fully know. All of these reflections are real experiences, but they are not the whole truth. Rest in the understanding that you live in a world of reflections, and that's actually okay. You don't need to grasp the ungraspable or fully understand the mystery. You can appreciate the moon in the water without needing to hold the moon in the sky. You can live with reflections, learn from them, be moved by them, without mistaking them for everything that is. Both moons are beautiful. Both are real in their own way. And you, experiencing both, are having a real experience of something that transcends both. Rest in that paradox tonight. Rest in reflection. Rest in the mystery of experiencing what you can never fully grasp. It's enough. It's always been enough. The reflection of peace is peaceful. The reflection of rest is restful. You don't need the original when the reflection serves you so well. Sleep now, watching both moons, knowing both are real and neither is everything. That's the truth. That's enough. As we move deeper into the quiet teachings of Zen, we come to a story about seeing clearly and understanding true value. Listen carefully to the next story. In a farming village, there lived a man named Ichiro, who worked a small plot of land that had been in his family for generations. The land was good, fertile and well positioned, except for one problem. Right in the middle of his best field sat an enormous stone, far too large to move. Ichiro's grandfather had farmed around it. His father had farmed around it. Now Ichiro farmed around it, losing valuable growing space to this immovable obstacle. Every planting season, he would curse the stone. Every harvest, he would calculate how much more rice he could have grown if that useless rock wasn't taking up space. Other farmers would commiserate with him. "What bad luck," they would say, "to have such a stone in your best field." Ichiro would nod bitterly, agreeing that the stone was his misfortune, a burden he had inherited and could do nothing about. One year, a severe drought struck the region. Streams dried up. Wells ran low. The sun beat down mercilessly and crops withered in the fields. Farmers watched helplessly as their year's work shriveled under the relentless heat. Ichiro was working in his field one afternoon, trying to save what plants he could with his limited water, when he noticed something. The crops growing on the north side of the large stone, in its shadow, were still green. While plants in full sun were dying, the ones protected by the stone's shade during the hottest part of the day were surviving. Ichiro sat down on the stone, really looking at it for the first time in years. This useless obstacle had just saved a portion of his crop. The shadow he had never paid attention to, the shade he had never valued, was the difference between some harvest and no harvest. As the drought continued, Ichiro began using the stone strategically. He planted his most vulnerable crops on its shaded side. He stored water containers against it, where the shade kept the water cooler. He rested against it during the hottest hours, conserving his energy in its shelter. By the end of that difficult season, Ichiro had one of the better harvests in the village. His neighbors asked him his secret, and he pointed to the stone. "That stone," they said. "But you've always cursed that stone. You've always called it useless." "I was wrong," Ichiro replied simply. "I called it useless because I was only thinking about what I wanted to use it for. I wanted the space it occupied. I wanted to plant where it stood, but the stone was never useless. I was just blind to its uses. It was providing shade, shelter, coolness. All along it had value. I just couldn't see it because I was so focused on what it prevented me from doing." A traveling monk who heard this story stayed to talk with Ichiro. "This is a profound teaching," the monk said. "We spend our lives surrounded by things we call useless, obstacles we resent, circumstances we wish were different. But often these things have value we don't recognize because we're only looking at them from one angle, in one season, for one purpose." Ichiro nodded. "I spent 20 years hating that stone, 20 years of resentment and frustration. And all that time, the stone was just being stone. It wasn't trying to hurt me. It wasn't deliberately in my way. It was just there, and it had qualities I never bothered to notice because I decided from the beginning that it was an obstacle." The monk smiled. "The stone didn't change. Your circumstances changed, which changed what you needed, which changed what you could see. In seasons of plenty, shade seems worthless. In drought, it becomes precious. The stone's value was always there. You just needed different eyes to see it." Over the following years, Ichiro's relationship with the stone completely transformed. He built a small shelter against it, where he could rest during work. Children from the village would play on it, climbing its sides. His wife would hang, washing on lines attached to it, using its height and the wind that flowed around it to dry clothes quickly. In winter, its mass absorbed sun during the day and radiated warmth in the evening. The stone that had seemed like nothing but an obstacle became the center of the farm's life. Ichiro would sit against it in the evening, feeling its sun-warmed surface against his back, and marvel at his former blindness. "I thought I knew what this stone was," he would tell visitors. "I thought it was useless, in the way, bad luck. But I was judging it by one criterion only. Could I plant rice where it stood? When the answer was no, I stopped looking. I never asked what else it might offer. I never wondered if it had value I wasn't seeing. I just decided it was worthless and carried that judgment for 20 years. A young farmer came to Ichiro for advice, complaining about his own problems. His field was too shady, too many trees, not enough open space for crops. "I'll never be successful," the young man said bitterly. "My land is wrong for farming." Ichiro took him to see the stone. "This stone was wrong for my purposes too, until the day it wasn't, until the day circumstances revealed value I had never seen. Your shady field might be wrong for rice, but what might it be right for? What grows well in shade? What animals prefer forest? What uses does shade have that open sun doesn't?" He placed his hand on the stone. "Don't spend 20 years resenting what you have, because it isn't what you wish you had. Look more carefully, change your angle, wait for different seasons. Most things have value. We just don't always have the eyes to see it, or the circumstances that reveal it." The young farmer took this teaching to heart. Instead of trying to clear his shady land for rice, he planted mushrooms, which thrived in the dim forest floor. He kept bees, which loved the diverse flowers that grew in the dappled light. He harvested medicinal herbs that required shade. Within a few years, he was more prosperous than the farmers with better land, because he had learned to work with what he had instead of resenting what he didn't have. Ichiro's stone became something of a local landmark. People would visit it, touch it, and remember to look at their own lives differently. What obstacles were they carrying resentment toward? What circumstances were they calling useless or unfortunate? What value might be present that they hadn't yet recognized? An old woman who came to see the stone told Ichiro, "I spent my whole life thinking my lack of children was a tragedy, a lack, a failure. But in my old age, I realized it gave me freedom to help many children in the village, to be a grandmother to dozens of families. What I thought was missing created space for something I never planned. Like your stone, my childlessness had value I couldn't see until I stopped judging it as purely negative." Tonight, as you rest, you might consider the stones in your own field, the obstacles you resent, the circumstances you wish were different, the qualities about yourself you judge as useless or wrong. What if these things have value you haven't yet recognized? What if they're serving purposes you can't see from your current angle? You don't have to love your obstacles or pretend difficulties aren't difficult, but you might hold judgment more lightly. This thing you call useless might be providing shade you've never noticed. This quality you call a flaw might be a strength in circumstances you haven't encountered yet. This obstacle you've been cursing might be exactly what saves you in a season you can't yet imagine. Rest now in acceptance of the stones in your field. They're not going anywhere. Fighting them, resenting them, wishing them away. These are just ways of suffering over what is. But looking at them freshly, wondering about hidden value, staying open to different perspectives, this is the way of peace. The stone doesn't need to move. Your eyes need to open. And in that opening, what seemed useless reveals itself as useful. What seemed like bad luck reveals itself as good fortune in disguise. In a rice field, at the edge of a village, there stood a scarecrow that the farmer had erected to keep birds away from his crops. The scarecrow stood perfectly still, day after day, doing nothing but being present in the field. Its arms were outstretched, its simple face looked out over the growing rice, and it never moved from its position. A merchant named Kazuo would pass this field every day on his way to town. Each time he saw the scarecrow, he felt a strange mixture of emotions. Sometimes he felt pity for it, standing there uselessly. Sometimes he felt contempt, thinking what a waste it was to occupy space without doing anything. Sometimes he felt anxious, as if the scarecrow's stillness was somehow judging his own constant busyness. One day, Kazuo stopped and spoke to the scarecrow, though he felt foolish doing so. "You just stand there," he said. "You don't move, you don't work, you don't accomplish anything." What kind of existence is that? A Zen monk named Hakuin happened to be walking past and overheard this one-sided conversation. He approached Kazuo with a smile. "You think the scarecrow does nothing?" Hakuin asked. "It just stands there," Kazuo replied, embarrassed to have been caught talking to a scarecrow. "It accomplishes nothing." "Does it keep birds from eating the rice?" Hakuin asked. "Well, yes, I suppose that's its purpose." "And does it accomplish this purpose by running around, flailing, working hard, being busy?" Kazuo looked at the scarecrow more carefully. "No. It accomplishes it by simply being present, by standing still." "Then it accomplishes everything necessary without appearing to do anything at all," Hakuin said. "This is Wu Wei, action through non-action, accomplishment through presence rather than busy effort." He gestured to the scarecrow. "Look at it. It doesn't worry about whether it's being productive enough. It doesn't stress about its purpose or question its worth. It doesn't compare itself to other scarecrows or feel inadequate. It simply stands, perfectly still, completely present, and in that stillness, it fulfills its function perfectly." Kazuo was quiet, thinking. He realized that he spent his entire life in constant motion, constant busyness, constantly trying to justify his existence through activity and accomplishment. He never allowed himself to simply be still without feeling guilty or anxious about it. "But I'm not a scarecrow," Kazuo protested. "I have things to do, responsibilities, work that requires effort." "Of course," Hakuin agreed. "But do you ever allow yourself to be still without justifying the stillness? Can you ever simply be present without needing to accomplish something, without needing to prove your worth through constant activity?" Kazuo couldn't answer. He realized he couldn't remember the last time he had been truly still without feeling that he was wasting time or being lazy. Hakuin continued. "The scarecrow teaches that sometimes presence itself is the action. Sometimes stillness accomplishes what busyness cannot. Sometimes the greatest wisdom is knowing when to stand perfectly still and let your simple presence be enough." Over the following weeks, Kazuo would stop by the scarecrow regularly. He began to practice standing still beside it, at first for just a minute, then longer. He found it incredibly difficult. His mind would flood with lists of things he should be doing. He would feel guilty for standing idle. He would worry about being seen as lazy. But gradually, he learned what the scarecrow knew: that stillness has its own value, that presence needs no justification, that sometimes the most profound action is no action at all. One day, as Kazuo stood in perfect stillness beside the scarecrow, the farmer approached him. "What are you doing?" the farmer asked. Kazuo smiled. "Learning from your scarecrow. Learning that I don't need to justify my existence through constant motion. Learning that presence itself is sometimes enough." The farmer laughed. "That scarecrow has taught many people. It stands there doing nothing, and yet it teaches more than many teachers who never stop talking. Tonight, as you rest, you can be like the scarecrow. You don't need to justify this stillness. You don't need to be accomplishing something every moment. You don't need to prove your worth through constant activity. Simply being here, present and still, is enough, more than enough. Your presence itself has value. Your stillness serves a purpose, even when it appears to do nothing. Rest without guilt. Be still without anxiety. Stand like the scarecrow in the field of your own life. And let your simple presence be the action that's needed." With each step on the Zen path, a new lesson unfolds. Now we turn to a story about recognition, of self, of others, and of what truly matters. Listen carefully to the next story. In a famous garden known for its roses, there appeared one season a strange mutation, a rosebush with no thorns. The stems were completely smooth, the flowers beautiful, but there was no defense, no sharp points to protect the plant from being damaged. The gardener, a woman named Ayame, was fascinated by this thornless rose. She thought it was perfect, an improvement over regular roses. Who wouldn't want roses without thorns? Roses that you could handle freely, cut without care, and arrange without risk of being pricked. She took cuttings from the thornless rose and propagated them, creating a whole section of the garden filled with these defenseless plants. She was so proud of this achievement that she invited people from across the region to see her thornless roses. But within a few months, problems appeared. Deer, which usually avoided the thorny roses, ate the thornless ones freely. Insects that were discouraged by thorns colonized these plants without resistance. Careless visitors would grab handfuls of flowers, taking far more than they would have if thorns had made them cautious. Within a year, the thornless roses were struggling. They required constant human protection, constant intervention, constant care in ways that regular roses never needed. What had seemed like an improvement turned out to be a vulnerability, a visiting botanist explained to Ayame. The thorns weren't a flaw in the design. They were part of the wisdom of the design. The rose needs protection because it's beautiful and therefore desirable. The thorns say, "Appreciate me from a respectful distance. If you want my beauty, approach carefully with awareness. Without that protection, the rose is too vulnerable to survive." Ayame was defensive at first, but thorns hurt people. Wouldn't it be better to have roses without danger? Danger isn't the only reason for boundaries, the botanist replied. The thorns create an appropriate relationship. They don't prevent you from enjoying the rose. They just require you to be careful, to pay attention, to approach with awareness rather than grabbing carelessly. The thornless rose invites carelessness, and carelessness destroys it. Ayami began to see the thornless roses differently. What she had thought was an improvement was actually a mutation that made the plant unable to protect itself. And that inability to protect itself meant the plant couldn't thrive. She noticed similar patterns in human behavior. People who had no boundaries, no ability to say no, no thorns to protect themselves, often ended up depleted and taken advantage of. Like her thornless roses, they needed constant intervention to survive because they couldn't protect themselves naturally. "The thorns aren't cruel," she told visitors who still admired the thornless roses. "They're wisdom. They're the rose's way of teaching appropriate relationships. Approach with care. Take only what's offered. Respect the boundary between appreciation and consumption. The thornless rose can't teach this lesson, so it gets consumed." She stopped propagating the thornless mutation and let those plants live out their natural lifespan while caring for them extra carefully. When they eventually died, she didn't replace them. Her garden returned to thorny roses that could protect themselves, that invited careful appreciation rather than careless grabbing. Tonight, you might consider your own thorns, the boundaries you felt guilty about, the protections you've thought were unfriendly or unkind, the ways you've learned to say no, to keep an appropriate distance, to require others to approach you with care rather than carelessness. These aren't flaws, they're wisdom. They're what allow you to survive and thrive. Don't apologize for your thorns. They're part of your design, protecting what's most beautiful about you from being carelessly destroyed. In a monastery where monks practiced intensive meditation, there was a monk named Genzo, who struggled more than any of the others. While his fellow monks seemed to make progress, reporting experiences of insight and clarity, Genzo felt nothing but confusion and exhaustion. He tried so hard. He would sit in meditation until his legs ached and his back screamed. He would concentrate fiercely, trying to force his mind into the states he read about in the sutras. He would stay up late studying, trying to understand intellectually what he couldn't grasp experientially. But nothing seemed to work. While others reported breakthrough moments, sudden insights, and powerful experiences during meditation, Genzo just felt tired. So tired that he would sometimes fall asleep during meditation sessions, which filled him with shame. The other monks were achieving enlightenment, and he couldn't even stay awake. The monastery's teacher, Master Dogen, watched Genzo's struggle with patient concern. He saw how the young monk was wearing himself out, how the desperate striving was actually creating obstacles rather than removing them. One day, after Genzo had fallen asleep during meditation yet again and woken up mortified, Dogen called him aside. "Genzo, you look exhausted. When did you last sleep a full night?" "I can't afford to sleep, Master. I'm so far behind the others. I need to practice more, not less." "Go to your room and sleep," Dogen said gently. "That's not a suggestion. It's an instruction. Sleep for as long as your body needs." Genzo was confused but obedient. He went to his room, lay down, and immediately fell into the deepest sleep he'd had in months. He slept through the afternoon, through the evening meditation, through the night, and into the next morning. When he finally woke, something was different. He couldn't name what had changed, but the world looked somehow clearer. The desperate striving that had consumed him was just gone. He felt a quietness inside that he'd never experienced before. He went to find Dogen, unsure what to say about this strange shift. "Master, something happened while I slept, but I don't know what. I feel different, but I didn't have any dramatic experience, any sudden insight. I just slept." Dogen smiled. "And in that sleep, you let go of trying. You let go of the desperate effort to achieve enlightenment. You stopped fighting with yourself. And in that letting go, what was always there became apparent." "But I didn't do anything," Genzo protested. "I just slept." "The others have profound experiences during meditation. I fell asleep." "Enlightenment isn't always dramatic," Dogen explained. "Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it comes not through effort, but through the cessation of effort. You've been trying so hard to wake up that you couldn't see you were already awake. You needed to sleep, to let go, to stop trying, for what's always been true to become obvious." Over the following days, Genzo noticed that the peace hadn't left him. It wasn't a dramatic altered state. It was more like a background quietness, a sense of okayness that didn't depend on circumstances. The desperate seeking was gone, not because he had found what he was looking for, but because he had realized he'd never lost it. Other monks asked him what had happened. "Did you have a breakthrough, a sudden awakening?" "I don't know," Genzo replied honestly. "I just slept. And when I woke up, something had shifted. But it wasn't like lightning striking. It was more like clouds clearing and realizing the sky had been there all along." Master Dogen used Genzo's experience to teach others. Many of you are waiting for dramatic enlightenment experiences. Thunder and lightning, profound insights, altered states. But enlightenment is often more subtle than that. It's the quiet recognition of what's always been true. It's the simple shift from trying to be at peace to noticing the peace that's already here. Years later, when Genzo told his story to students, he would laugh at his younger self. "I was trying so hard to wake up that I exhausted myself. I thought enlightenment was something to achieve through effort. But sometimes you have to stop trying to wake up and just let yourself sleep. Sometimes awakening comes through the door you're not watching." Tonight, stop trying so hard. Stop striving for perfect meditation or ideal relaxation or correct rest. Stop watching for enlightenment or breakthroughs or special experiences. Just sleep. Just let go. Just be tired and allow yourself rest without judgment. What you're seeking might come not through your effort, but through your willingness to stop efforting and simply be. Sleep through your own awakening if you must. It will be there when you wake. As our exploration of Zen Buddhism deepens, let us listen to a story that reveals how true worth is often overlooked. Here starts the next story. In a garden temple, the monks kept a beautiful crane named Haku in a large bamboo enclosure. Haku had been brought to the temple as an injured chick, nursed back to health, and raised in the enclosure where he was safe from predators and provided with ample food. For 3 years, Haku lived comfortably in his bamboo home. The monks fed him daily, cleaned his space, and even spoke to him in gentle tones. He had everything a crane could need except freedom, though the monks assured themselves they were keeping him safe. One day, a traveling priest named Osho visited the temple and saw Haku in his enclosure. The priest noticed that Haku's wings had grown strong and full. He was clearly capable of flight. Yet he never attempted to fly beyond the bamboo walls, even though portions of the enclosure were open to the sky. "Why doesn't your crane fly away?" Osho asked the monks. "He could if he wanted to," one monk replied. "We don't clip his wings." But he stays because he knows this is where his food comes, where he's safe, where he belongs. Osho watched Haku for several days. The crane would walk around his enclosure, occasionally stretching his wings, but never attempting actual flight. It was as if Haku had forgotten that flight was even possible, that his wings had any purpose beyond stretching. On his last day at the temple, Osho asked permission to enter Haku's enclosure. He approached the crane slowly, then suddenly clapped his hands and shouted, startling Haku into the air. The crane's wings opened instinctively, and for a moment, Haku was flying, truly flying, circling above the enclosure in surprise. But after only 2 circles, Haku landed back in his familiar corner, as if the brief flight had frightened rather than thrilled him. He settled back into his routine immediately, walking the same worn paths he always walked. The monks were angry. "You scared him! You could have hurt him!" "I showed him he could fly," Osho replied calmly, "but he chose to land." That choice tells me something important. Your crane is imprisoned not by bamboo walls, but by comfort. He could leave any time, but he won't, because the enclosure has become more familiar than freedom. He looked at the monks gathered around him. And before you judge Haku too harshly, ask yourselves, how are you different? How many of you are living in comfortable enclosures of your own making, never attempting to fly because the familiar is safer than the possible? One young monk, named Botan, was particularly struck by this question. He realized he had been at the temple for 5 years, had taken preliminary vows, but had never fully committed to the monastic life. He was comfortable in this in-between state, receiving the structure and security of monastery life without the full commitment it demanded. Like Haku, he had wings he never used. After Osho left, Botan couldn't stop thinking about the crane. He began to see Haku differently, not as a bird being kept safe, but as a bird being kept comfortable in a cage he could leave any time. And he began to see himself the same way. He started paying attention to all the ways the monastery had become his comfortable enclosure. He knew when every meal would come. He knew exactly what each day would bring. He had routines that felt safe, relationships that felt predictable, a life that felt controlled. And he realized this comfort was preventing him from attempting the flight that monastic life was actually meant to enable. The leap into full commitment, into genuine spiritual practice, into the risk and uncertainty that real transformation requires. "I've been living like Haku," Botan confessed to the abbot. "Safe and comfortable, but not really alive. Not really practicing, just walking the same familiar paths day after day." The abbot, who'd been troubled by Osho's words about the crane, nodded. "You're not alone." Many of us have made the monastery into a comfortable cage rather than a launching place. We've mistaken security for wisdom, routine for practice, comfort for peace. He gestured toward Haku's enclosure. The priest was right to startle the crane into flight. Not to frighten him, but to remind him what his wings were for. Perhaps we all need to be startled sometimes, reminded that we have wings we're not using, capabilities we're not exercising, flights we're not attempting, because the ground feels safer. The monks began to look at their own lives with new eyes. They noticed patterns of comfortable avoidance, ways they stayed safely within self-imposed limits, flights they could attempt but didn't. The monastery, meant to be a place of transformation, had become for many a place of comfortable stagnation. Gradually, changes began to happen. Monks who had been avoiding difficult practices began to attempt them. Commitments that had been postponed were made. Risks that had seemed too frightening were taken. Not everyone changed. Some preferred the comfortable enclosure, but many discovered they had wings they had forgotten about. As for Haku, the monks began to encourage him to fly, taking him to open areas and gently startling him into the air. At first, he would fly only briefly before landing back in familiar territory, but eventually, his flights grew longer. One day, Haku flew beyond the temple grounds entirely and didn't return. The monks felt both loss and joy. They had loved having Haku, but they recognized that keeping him comfortable had been keeping him caged. Setting him free, truly free, not just free within limits, was the compassionate thing, even though it meant losing him. Botan, watching Haku disappear into the distance, felt inspired. If a crane can remember how to fly after 3 years of comfortable captivity, then surely I can remember what I came here to do. I've been in my bamboo enclosure long enough. He took his final vows that week, fully committing to monastic life. It was terrifying in a way his comfortable half-commitment had never been. But it was also exhilarating, like stretching wings he had forgotten he possessed. Years later, when Botan had become a teacher, he would often tell the story of Haku the crane. "We all build comfortable enclosures," he would say. "Relationships that feel safe but limit growth. Jobs that provide security but prevent exploration. Routines that feel comforting but cage us. The bamboo walls look like protection, but they're actually prevention, preventing us from discovering what we're capable of, from attempting flights we were made for." Students would ask, but how do we know when comfort has become a cage? When should we leave the enclosure? When you're walking the same paths day after day without growth, Botan would reply. When you've stopped even looking at the sky. When you've forgotten you have wings. When the thought of flying fills you with fear rather than excitement. These are signs that comfort has become captivity, that the safe enclosure has become a prison you don't recognize as a prison because it's comfortable. He would pause, then add, "The tragedy isn't being in the enclosure. The tragedy is forgetting you can leave, forgetting you were made for flight, forgetting that your wings have purpose beyond stretching." Haku lived 3 years in comfortable captivity before someone reminded him he could fly. How many years will you live in yours before you remember? Tonight, as you rest, you might consider your own bamboo enclosure. What comfortable cage have you built for yourself? What safe patterns have you established that prevent growth? What flights are you not attempting because staying grounded feels safer? You have wings. You've always had wings. The question isn't whether you're capable of flight. You are. The question is whether you've become so comfortable with the ground that you've forgotten that the sky is where you belong. Whether the bamboo enclosure feels so safe that you've stopped noticing it's still an enclosure. Rest tonight with this awareness. Tomorrow, you could fly. You could attempt something that terrifies you. You could leave the comfortable patterns and risk the unknown. You could stretch your wings, not just as exercise, but as preparation for actual flight. The cage isn't locked. It never was. You've just been comfortable enough that you forgot to try the door. Sleep now and dream of flying. Let some part of you remember what your wings are for. And when you wake, maybe, just maybe, you'll be ready to find out what happens when you actually use them. There was a master calligrapher named Yukiko who had devoted her entire life to the art of beautiful writing. For 60 years, she had practiced daily, creating works that were displayed in temples and palaces throughout the land. Her characters were considered the finest of her generation. But as she grew old, her hands began to shake. The tremor was slight at first, barely noticeable, but gradually it worsened, until she could no longer create the smooth flowing lines that had been her signature. The characters she wrote became jagged, uneven, broken by the involuntary movements of her aging hands. Yukiko was devastated. Calligraphy was not just her work, it was her identity, her life's purpose. She had defined herself through her art for 60 years. Now, unable to produce the quality of work she had maintained for decades, she felt her life was over. If she couldn't create beautiful calligraphy, what was she? She stopped taking commissions. She stopped teaching students. She sat in her studio, staring at blank paper, unable to bring herself to create imperfect work. Each day felt like waiting for death, as if her life had ended, even though her body continued. One day, a young calligrapher named Kenji came to visit her. He had studied her work and wanted to meet her before she died, as he had heard she was no longer creating. "Master Yukiko," he said, bowing deeply, "please, will you show me how you create such beautiful work?" "I can't," Yukiko replied bitterly. "My hands shake. I can no longer do what I once did. My time is over." "Show me anyway," Kenji persisted. "Show me what you do now, even if it's not what you once did." Reluctantly, to satisfy this persistent young man, Yukiko took up her brush. Her hand trembled as she moved it across the paper. The line broke and wavered. The character she was forming looked nothing like the smooth, perfect characters she had created for 60 years. But Kenji was staring at it with wonder. "This is extraordinary." "It's broken," Yukiko said. "It's everything I spent my life learning not to do." "It's alive," Kenji replied. "Your old work was perfect, but this has something your perfect work didn't have. It has a vulnerability. It has humanity. It shows the reality of the hand that made it, the tremor that comes with age, the imperfection that comes with being human. It's no less beautiful. It's beautiful in a different way." He pointed to specific places where the line broke. "See how this break creates a pause, a breath? See how this wobble adds energy, movement? You couldn't create these effects intentionally. They come from not being able to control everything, from allowing the reality of your condition to show." Yukiko looked at her shaky calligraphy with new eyes. She had been seeing only what it wasn't: smooth, controlled, perfect. She hadn't been seeing what it was: authentic, immediate, marked by the truth of her aging body. "You're saying my shaking hands aren't ending my art?" she asked. "They're changing it. They're revealing a new possibility," Kenji said. You've mastered perfection. You spent 60 years learning complete control. Now you're learning something else. How to create beauty without control. How to let your limitations become part of your art rather than obstacles to it. This isn't an ending. This is a beginning. Over the following months, Yukiko began to explore what Kenji had called a beginning. She stopped trying to fight against her tremor and started working with it. She let the shakiness show, let the broken lines be part of the aesthetic. Let her aging hands tell their own truth. The work she created was unlike anything she had done before. It had a raw quality, an honesty, a profound beauty that came from acceptance rather than mastery. People who saw it were moved in ways they couldn't quite explain. It touched something in them that perfect calligraphy never had. Your new work feels more human, one viewer said. The perfection was impressive, but this is relatable. This shows struggle and acceptance. This shows life as it actually is, not as we wish it to be. Other aging artists heard about Yukiko's transformation and came to see her. They too had been treating their declining abilities as endings, as tragedies that marked the end of their creative lives. Yukiko showed them something different. What you call an ending is just a transition, she told a painter whose eyesight was failing. You've lost what you had, yes, but loss creates space for something new. If you spend all your time mourning what's gone, you'll never discover what's trying to arrive. She showed them her shaky calligraphy. These tremors would have horrified me 5 years ago. I would have hidden this work in shame. But I've learned that every ending contains a beginning. My hands' steady control had to end before I could begin learning to create beauty from their unsteady truth. A sculptor whose arthritis had made detailed work impossible asked, "But how do you accept the loss? How do you stop grieving what you can no longer do?" "I still grieve it sometimes," Yukiko admitted. "I still miss the feeling of complete control, the satisfaction of executing exactly what I envisioned. But I've discovered something. The part of me that created perfect calligraphy was actually quite limited. It could only create what I consciously intended. Now, with my shaking hands, I create things I never could have planned. The imperfection introduces an element beyond my control, and that element often produces more interesting results than my intentions ever did." She held up a piece of her new work. "See this character? I intended it to look one way. My tremor made it look another way. And the way it actually looks is more compelling than what I planned. The beginning I'm in now includes accident, chance, collaboration with my body's wisdom rather than domination of it." Kenji, who continued to visit Yukiko regularly, said, "You've become a better artist by becoming worse at control. Your mastery now includes accepting what you can't master. That's a higher skill than perfect technique ever was." Yukiko nodded. "When I had complete control, I could only create versions of what I already knew. Now, with partial control, I'm discovering things I didn't know were possible. The ending of my old art was the beginning of art I couldn't have created any other way." A Zen master who collected calligraphy commissioned a piece from Yukiko. When she delivered it, with all its shaky lines and broken strokes, he hung it in his meditation hall's place of honor. "This shows the essence of Zen," he told his students. Perfection is static, fixed, dead. This work is dynamic, alive, accepting of change and impermanence. The master's tremor isn't a flaw in the work. It's the work teaching its deepest truth, that beauty includes imperfection, that endings contain beginnings, that loss creates space for discovery. Yukiko lived another 15 years, creating what many considered her finest work during this period. Critics called her late-style revolutionary, noting how it had influenced a generation of younger artists to embrace imperfection and vulnerability in their work. When she finally died at 85, still creating tremor-marked calligraphy to the end, her students gathered to remember her. They spoke of her two periods, the 60 years of perfect control and the 15 years of acknowledged tremor. "Which period was greater?" a young student asked. An older student replied, "She was always great." But she became wise only in her second period, when she learned that endings contain beginnings. When she discovered that what you lose forces you to find what you didn't know was there. When she understood that every door that closes reveals another door you weren't seeing before. Tonight, as you rest, what endings are you mourning? What losses are you treating as pure conclusions with nothing beyond them? What abilities, relationships, or circumstances have ended that you're grieving, as if ending means death rather than transition? Every ending contains a beginning you can't see yet. The closing of one possibility opens others that couldn't have opened if the first possibility had continued. Your losses aren't just subtractions. They're also additions of space, of new potential, of directions you couldn't have gone while the old way remained available. What's ending in you right now isn't your conclusion, it's your transition. Something is completing, so something else can begin. The tremor that seems to be ruining your perfect lines is actually creating new kinds of beauty you couldn't have achieved through control alone. Rest now in acceptance of endings as beginnings in disguise. What's leaving is making room. What's breaking is revealing. What's ending is beginning, just not in ways you can recognize yet. Trust the ending. It knows what it's doing. Every conclusion contains a hidden opening, and you're moving toward it even as you mourn what's closing behind you. Sleep now in the space between ending and beginning, knowing that this space itself is fertile ground where something unexpected and beautiful is already starting to grow. Continuing along the path of Zen insight, we pause now to hear a teaching about perception and hidden value. Listen carefully to the next story. In an ancient temple, there lived a cat named Tama, who seemed to do nothing but sleep in the sun. While monks meditated, Tama napped. While monks worked, Tama lounged. While monks studied, Tama groomed herself lazily. To visitors, the cat appeared to be a freeloader, enjoying the temple's hospitality while contributing nothing. A new abbot arrived at the temple, a young man named Ryokan, who believed in efficiency and purpose. He was troubled by the cat's apparent uselessness. "That cat does nothing," he complained to the senior monks. "She just sleeps and eats. Why do we keep her?" The senior monks smiled but said nothing. They had learned long ago that Tama's purpose wasn't obvious to everyone immediately. Ryokan decided the cat had to earn her keep. He began assigning her duties: chase mice in the storage rooms, patrol the gardens for pests, anything productive. But Tama ignored these assignments. She continued her routine of sleeping in sunny spots, occasionally stretching, maintaining her serene presence. Frustrated, Ryokan announced his intention to find the cat a new home. We cannot justify feeding an animal that serves no purpose. That very night, as if to prove his point, mice invaded the temple's grain storage. Ryokan rushed to wake the cat, to put her to work catching these pests. But he couldn't find her. She wasn't in any of her usual sleeping spots. Then he heard it. A soft, steady purring coming from the storage room. He opened the door and found Tama sitting perfectly still in the center of the room. She wasn't chasing mice. She wasn't even moving. She was just sitting, present, alert, purring quietly. And there were no mice in the room. Ryokan could hear them in the walls, could hear them trying to enter, but none crossed the threshold where Tama sat. Her mere presence, her calm watchfulness, was keeping them at bay. She didn't need to chase them. She didn't need to kill them. She just needed to be there. Ryokan watched for over an hour. Tama never moved, never broke her meditation. She was like a guardian statue, her presence creating a boundary that mice instinctively wouldn't cross. Finally, as dawn approached, she stood, stretched, and calmly walked out of the storage room, heading for her favorite sunny spot. The senior monks found Ryokan standing in wonder. "She does have a purpose," he said quietly. "Yes," one of the senior monks replied, "but not the purpose you imagined. You wanted her to chase and hunt. You wanted visible action, measurable productivity. But Tama's gift is presence. She protects through being, not through doing. The mice sense a predator and stay away. She doesn't have to work hard. She just has to be what she is." Another monk added, "We tried to train cats before Tama. Cats that were energetic hunters, always chasing, always catching. But they disturbed the temple's peace. They left dead mice everywhere. They were exhausting to live with. Tama protects quietly, peacefully, just by being present. Her seeming laziness is actually perfect efficiency." Ryokan bowed to the cat, who had settled into a patch of morning sun and was already falling asleep. "Forgive me, Tama. I judged your worth by my standards instead of understanding your actual purpose." From that day forward, Ryokan looked at everything in the temple differently. The old plum tree that no longer bore fruit he had planned to cut down. But the monks showed him how its branches were perfect for birds to nest in, how its shade cooled the meditation hall on summer days, how its twisted trunk was beautiful in a way that useful, productive trees never were. Its purpose wasn't production, its purpose was beauty and shelter. The ancient bell that was cracked and no longer rang clearly, he wanted to replace. But the monks explained that its imperfect tone was beloved, that its crack created a unique sound found nowhere else, and that generations of monks had learned to meditate to this particular tone. Its flaw was actually its distinction. The novice monk who seemed slow at learning, whom Ryokan had considered asking to leave, turned out to be extraordinarily patient with visitors, able to sit with grieving people for hours without becoming uncomfortable. His slowness at intellectual tasks was balanced by his gift for compassionate presence. "I've been judging everything by a narrow standard," Ryokan confessed to the senior monks. "Productivity, efficiency, obvious usefulness, but the temple isn't a business, it's an ecosystem. Everything has its place, its purpose, even if that purpose isn't immediately obvious or doesn't fit conventional measures of value. He spent hours watching Tama, learning from her. She seemed to do nothing, yet her presence maintained order. She appeared lazy, yet she was perfectly alert when needed. She looked like a burden, yet she contributed essential value. She taught that being can be as important as doing, that presence can accomplish what action cannot, that some purposes are served by appearing purposeless. One day, a wealthy donor visited the temple and was offended to see a cat sleeping on expensive cushions in the main hall. "Why do you allow this animal such privilege? She produces nothing." Ryokan smiled and told the story of Tama and the mice. She produces protection through presence. She contributes peace through her serene being. Her value can't be measured in conventional terms, but it's real and essential. She teaches us that purpose isn't always about production or visible action. Sometimes purpose is about simply being what you are, fully and completely in the right place. The donor looked skeptical, so Ryokan continued. "You're a wealthy merchant. You measure value in terms of production, profit, and tangible results, but not everything valuable can be measured that way. How do you measure the worth of beauty, of peace, of a presence that prevents problems rather than solving them? Tama's purpose is subtle but essential. Without her, we would have chaos. With her, we have order. That she achieves this through napping rather than through frantic activity doesn't diminish her contribution." Years passed, and eventually Tama grew old and died. The monks gave her a funeral with full honors, acknowledging her years of service. They tried to find another cat to serve her function, but none could quite match her particular gift. Some cats were too aggressive, chasing everything and disturbing the peace. Others were too passive, failing to maintain the protective presence that Tama had embodied. Finally, they found a cat with Tama's quality, a calm, serene presence that protected through being rather than doing. This cat they named Tama II, and she took up residence in the sunny spots her predecessor had loved, continuing the tradition of purposeful purposelessness. Ryokan, now an old man himself, would often sit with the new Tama and remember the lessons the original had taught him. "Every being has its place in the whole," he would tell young monks, "but that place might not look like what we expect." Purpose isn't always about obvious productivity. Sometimes it's about being present, being yourself, contributing in ways that aren't measurable but are nonetheless essential. He would point to the sleeping cat. Tama teaches us not to judge too quickly, not to assess worth by narrow standards, not to dismiss what we don't immediately understand. She teaches us that the temple, like all of life, is an ecosystem where even the apparently useless serves a purpose, where presence matters as much as action, where being is as valuable as doing. Tonight, as you rest, you might consider your own purpose. Perhaps you've been judging yourself by standards that don't fit what you actually are. Perhaps you've been trying to be productive in ways that go against your nature. Perhaps you've been dismissing your own value because it doesn't fit conventional measures. What if your purpose, like Tama's, is partly about presence, about being what you are, where you are, contributing value that isn't always visible or measurable? What if your times of rest, of apparent inactivity, of just being present, are actually serving important purposes that busy productivity never could? You don't have to chase and hunt and constantly produce to have worth. Sometimes protection comes through peaceful presence. Sometimes order is maintained through calm being. Sometimes the most valuable thing you can do is rest completely, be present fully, and trust that your very existence contributes to the whole in ways you may never fully understand. Sleep now like Tama, knowing that even in sleeping, you serve a purpose. As we drift deeper into the still waters of Zen, a quiet teaching begins to rise, one that speaks of clarity and of value not always seen. Listen gently now. The next story begins. In a village known for pottery, there lived a potter named Masao who had studied for decades under the greatest masters. He created bowls, cups, and vessels of exceptional quality, each piece perfectly formed, perfectly glazed, perfectly fired. His work was sought after by tea masters and collectors, and he took enormous pride in never releasing a flawed piece. Any pot that emerged from the kiln with even the slightest imperfection, Masao would destroy immediately. A hairline crack, an uneven glaze, a slight asymmetry, these were intolerable failures in his eyes. His studio floor was littered with shards of pieces that hadn't met his exacting standards. One day, Masao created a tea bowl for the most important commission of his life. The provincial governor had requested a ceremonial bowl for an upcoming tea gathering with the emperor. Masao worked on this bowl for weeks, preparing the clay with unusual care, forming it with absolute precision, applying the glaze with perfect evenness. When he opened the kiln after firing, his heart sank. The bowl was magnificent in form, perfect in proportion, beautiful in color. But there, running from the rim down the side, was a crack. Not a dramatic break, but a fine line that compromised the bowl's perfection. Masao's first instinct was to smash it immediately, as he did with all flawed work. But the deadline was close, and he had no time to create another bowl of this quality. He sat staring at the cracked bowl, torn between his standards and his practical needs. Finally, he decided to show it to the governor and explain the situation, offering to work day and night to create a replacement. When he presented the bowl and apologized for its flaw, the governor examined it carefully. "This crack," the governor said, tracing it with his finger. "It's interesting. It adds something to the piece. It makes it unique." "It makes it flawed," Masao protested. "A tea bowl should be perfect. This crack means the bowl could fail, could break apart entirely. It's a structural weakness." "Or it's a story," the governor replied. "This bowl is telling us something, that even in our most careful efforts, nature has its own say. The fire does what it will. The clay responds according to its own nature. Your perfect technique met forces beyond your control, and this crack is the conversation between them." He held the bowl up to the light. "I think I'll use this bowl for the emperor's tea." A perfect bowl says nothing except, "Look how skilled the potter is." This bowl says something more interesting. "Look how skill and accident can create something neither could create alone." Masao was unconvinced but had no choice. The governor kept the cracked bowl. On the day of the emperor's visit, Masao attended the tea ceremony, anxious about his flawed work being used in such an important context. The emperor held the bowl, examining it from every angle. He paused at the crack, running his thumb along it thoughtfully. Masao held his breath, certain his reputation was about to be destroyed. "This crack," the emperor said finally, is the most honest thing in this entire ceremony. Everything else is pretending to be perfect. The precise movements, the practiced words, the carefully arranged flowers. But this bowl admits it's not perfect. It shows its vulnerability. And in doing so, it invites us to be real rather than ceremonial. He looked directly at Masao. "Did you make this crack deliberately?" "No, Your Majesty," Masao admitted. "It's a flaw. I almost destroyed the bowl because of it." "Then it's a gift," the emperor replied. "A deliberate crack would be pretentious, a manufactured authenticity. But this crack happened. The bowl is showing us the truth of its making, that fire and clay have their own will, that perfection is an illusion, that beauty can include what we consider flaws." After the ceremony, a renowned tea master approached Masao. "That bowl is the finest piece you've ever created." "But it's cracked," Masao said, still unable to accept this interpretation. "Exactly," the tea master replied. "Your perfect bowls are impressive but distant. They're so perfect they feel inhuman, unreal. But this bowl with its crack is approachable. It's marked by the actual process of its creation. It doesn't pretend to be more than what it is, clay and glaze and fire meeting imperfectly." He held the bowl carefully. "In the tea ceremony, we value wabi-sabi, the beauty of imperfection, impermanence, and incompleteness. Your perfect bowls violate wabi-sabi. They're trying too hard to be permanent, complete, perfect. This cracked bowl embodies wabi-sabi perfectly. It shows age before it's even been used. It admits its fragility. It's honest." Over the following weeks, Masao struggled with this new perspective. His entire career had been built on the pursuit of perfection, on the elimination of flaws. Now he was being told that his flawed bowl was his finest work precisely because of its flaw. He began to experiment. He still created bowls with his full skill and attention, but he stopped destroying pieces that emerged with cracks, asymmetries, or irregularities. He studied these flawed pieces, trying to understand what made some flaws interesting and others merely defects. He discovered something subtle. There were flaws that came from carelessness or poor technique, and these did diminish the work. But some flaws came from the honest interaction of materials and fire, and these often added something that perfect technique alone could never achieve. The cracked bowl became famous. Tea masters throughout the region requested pieces from Masao that had this quality of honest imperfection. He became known not for perfect bowls, but for bowls that told the truth of their making, that showed the conversation between intention and accident, control and surrender. "I spent 30 years trying to eliminate every flaw," Masao would tell students who came to learn from him. "I thought my job was to impose my will perfectly on clay and fire. But actually, my job is to create conditions and then allow the fire to have its say. The crack in that bowl taught me that some of what I called flaws were actually the fire's contribution to the work. I was rejecting collaboration, insisting on control. The crack showed me a better way." He would show students two bowls, one perfect by traditional standards, one marked by a crack or asymmetry. Which is more beautiful? The answer depends on what you value. If you value technical mastery and perfect execution, choose the perfect bowl. If you value honesty and the authentic marks of process, choose the cracked one. Neither is wrong. But I wasted decades making only one kind of bowl because I couldn't see value in the other. A young potter asked, "So should we try to make flawed pieces? Should we create cracks deliberately?" "No," Masao replied firmly. "Deliberate cracks are dishonest, just a performance of imperfection. Do your best work, use your full skill and attention, then accept what emerges, including the flaws. Some flaws you'll need to recognize as failures, results of inattention or poor technique that you can learn from. But some flaws you'll need to recognize as gifts, contributions from forces beyond your control that add something you couldn't have planned." He held up the famous cracked bowl, now aged and stained from years of use. "This bowl has served the emperor and countless tea masters. The crack never caused it to fail. Instead, the crack gave it character, made it memorable, and allowed it to teach something that perfect bowls never could. What I considered its fatal flaw was actually its finest feature." Tonight, as you rest, you might reconsider your own cracks, your own flaws, the things about yourself or your life that don't meet your standards of perfection. What if some of these aren't failures but features? What if what you consider your greatest weakness is actually adding something that strength alone never could? The cracked bowl served perfectly. Its flaw didn't prevent it from holding tea. It enhanced its ability to hold meaning. Your flaws might work the same way. They might not prevent you from serving your purpose. They might deepen it, make it more honest, more relatable, more real. Rest now in acceptance of your cracks. Not every imperfection is a gift, but some are. Not every flaw adds value, but some do. The question isn't whether you're perfect. You're not, and you never will be. The question is whether your imperfections are honest marks of your making, authentic results of your interaction with forces beyond your control. Those kinds of flaws don't diminish you. They complete you. The potter's cracked bowl teaches that perfection isn't always the goal. Sometimes the goal is authenticity, honesty, and the willingness to show the truth of your process, including its imperfections. Sleep now as a cracked bowl, flawed but functional, imperfect but honest, broken in ways that somehow make you more whole. A young man named Tetsu came to study with a famous Zen master named Bankei. Tetsu had read many books about Buddhism and philosophy. He arrived full of questions, eager to test his understanding against the master's wisdom. On his first day, Bankei asked Tetsu, "What do you know about Zen?" Tetsu was ready for this question. He began to explain the concepts he had learned: emptiness, Buddha nature, the middle way, non-duality. He spoke for 20 minutes, demonstrating his knowledge, occasionally glancing at Bankei to see if the master was impressed. When Tetsu finally finished, Bankei said simply, "What else?" Tetsu was confused. "What do you mean, what else?" "You've told me what you know about Zen. Now tell me what you don't know." "Well," Tetsu hesitated. This wasn't a question he had prepared for. "I suppose there are advanced teachings I haven't encountered yet, and practical applications I'm still learning." "That's not what I asked," Bankei said. "I asked what you don't know. Not what you haven't learned yet, but what you genuinely don't know and recognize as unknowable." Tetsu was silent. He had spent years accumulating knowledge, thinking that was the path to wisdom. The idea of deliberately acknowledging what he didn't know felt like admitting defeat. "Come back tomorrow," Bankei said, "with a list of everything you don't know." Tetsu spent all evening trying to complete this impossible assignment. Every time he wrote "I don't know X," he would realize that he did know something about X, or could figure it out, or could look it up. By midnight, his page was blank. He couldn't genuinely claim not to know anything because he could always imagine ways to know it. The next morning, he returned to Bankei with empty hands. "I couldn't make the list." "Why not?" "Because I kept finding that I could know things, or learn things, or figure things out. I couldn't find anything I genuinely don't know." Bankei smiled. "Then you've learned nothing from your books. Because the wisest people are the ones who understand the vastness of what they don't know. Knowledge is a small island in an ocean of mystery. The more you know, the more coastline you have touching that ocean, the more you realize how much is unknown. But you've built your island and convinced yourself it's the whole world." He gestured for Tetsu to sit. "Tell me something simple. Why does the sun rise each morning?" "Because of the Earth's rotation," Tetsu answered confidently. "And why does the Earth rotate?" "Because of physics, angular momentum from the solar system's formation." "And why does the universe have these laws of physics rather than different ones?" Tetsu opened his mouth, then closed it. He had no answer. "You see?" Bankei said gently. "3 questions deep, and we've reached mystery. You can describe what happens, but you can't explain why it happens, why existence is this way, rather than some other way. Behind every answer is a deeper question, and eventually, we reach the ground of not knowing." He poured tea for both of them. "The problem with collecting knowledge is that it makes you think you understand. You learn the names of things, the explanations, the theories, and you mistake the map for the territory. You think because you can explain how a flower grows, you understand the flower, but you don't. The mystery of existence, of consciousness, of why there's something rather than nothing, this remains completely unknown no matter how much you learn." Tetsu felt something loosening in his chest. "So all my study was worthless?" "Not worthless," Bankei replied, "but incomplete. Knowledge without the humility of not knowing is just cleverness. It makes you think you've arrived when you've barely begun the journey. The real beginning of wisdom is when you stop pretending to know and start genuinely inquiring into what you don't know and can't know." Over the following months, Tetsu's approach to learning changed completely. Instead of trying to know everything, he practiced living with mystery. Instead of collecting answers, he sat with questions. Instead of explaining away wonder, he let himself be filled with it. He discovered that not knowing wasn't weakness or ignorance. It was openness. It was the beginner's mind that could see things freshly. It was the humility that made real learning possible. Years later, when Tetsu had students of his own, they would sometimes come to him full of questions, wanting answers to everything. And Tetsu would smile and ask, "What do you really want to know?" "Everything," they would say. And Tetsu would reply, "Then start by knowing that you know nothing. That the mystery is vast and you're a brief candle trying to illuminate infinity. Let that not knowing be your teacher. It's more honest than any answer I could give you." Tonight, let yourself not know. You don't have to figure everything out. You don't have to understand your life completely. You don't have to know why things happen or what it all means. You can rest in mystery, in not knowing, in the simple presence of being alive, without needing to explain it. The wisest rest comes not from having all the answers, but from being comfortable with questions that have no answers. Let yourself not know. That's where wisdom begins. With each breath, we continue our journey through the wisdom of Zen, where the smallest stone may hold the greatest truth. Here starts the next story. In a town famous for its craftsmen, there lived a clockmaker named Kenji who created timepieces of extraordinary precision. His clocks kept perfect time. His watches never gained or lost a second. People came from distant cities to purchase his work, and his reputation spread widely. But something happened to Kenji as his skill grew. He became obsessed with time in a way that began to consume his life. He would check his clocks constantly, comparing them against each other, anxious if any showed even the slightest deviation. He scheduled every moment of his day, allocating specific minutes to each task. He kept detailed records of how long everything took, analyzing his efficiency, trying to waste no time. His wife would call him for dinner, and he would arrive exactly at the scheduled moment, not a minute early or late. His children would ask him to play, and he would check his schedule, finding a 15-minute slot and setting a timer so he wouldn't run over. He measured everything, tracked everything, lived his entire life by the clock. People admired his discipline. Kenji wastes no time, they would say. He's so efficient, so organized. But his family felt differently. His wife felt like he was never really present, always watching the time, even during conversations. His children learned to stop asking him to play spontaneously, knowing he would need to check if that time was allocated. One day, Kenji's elderly father became very ill. Kenji visited him at the scheduled time each day, staying for exactly the planned duration. On what turned out to be his father's last day, Kenji was sitting beside the bed when his timer went off, indicating his visit slot was complete. "I have to go," Kenji said, standing up. "I have a client appointment in 20 minutes, and it takes 15 minutes to get there, so I need to leave now to be on time." His father looked at him with sad eyes. "Kenji, I may not be here tomorrow." "I know, father. I'll come back tomorrow at 2 p.m. as scheduled." His father died that evening, while Kenji was home eating dinner at precisely 6 p.m. as his schedule dictated. At the funeral, Kenji's father's friend, an old Zen monk named Joshu, approached him. "Your father loved you very much," Joshu said. "I know," Kenji replied. "I visited him every day." "Did you?" Joshu asked gently. "Or did you visit the time slot you had allocated for visiting?" Kenji felt something crack inside his chest. He opened his mouth to argue, but no words came. The monk was right. He had been there in body but not in presence. His mind had been on the clock, on the schedule, on the next appointment. He had measured out his love in timed portions, and now his father was gone, and all those precisely measured visits felt hollow. "I wasted it," Kenji whispered. "All that time I tracked so carefully, all that time I organized and measured, and I wasted the time that mattered." "You didn't waste it," Joshu said, "but you didn't fully live it either. You were so busy measuring time that you forgot to experience it." In his grief and shock, something shifted in Kenji. He went home and looked at all his clocks, all these devices he had spent years perfecting. They ticked away, measuring, dividing, tracking. And he realized they were measuring something that couldn't really be measured. A moment of real connection with his child had no measurable duration. The joy of a beautiful sunset didn't fit into scheduled slots. The depth of presence with another person couldn't be quantified in minutes and seconds. He had been living as if time were the most important thing, when actually what happened in time was what mattered. The next day, Kenji did something that shocked the town. He closed his clock shop. He put away his watches and timers. He stopped scheduling his days in measured blocks. His wife thought he had lost his mind. What will we do? How will we live? We'll live, Kenji said simply. Actually live. Not to measure our living. When I'm hungry, I'll eat. When I'm tired, I'll sleep. When our children want to play, I'll play. Not because it's scheduled, but because the moment calls for it. He still made clocks. It was his craft, his art, but he made them differently now. He would work on one until it felt complete, not until a timer said his work session was over. He would stop if he felt called to watch the sunset, or talk with a neighbor, or sit with his wife. He stopped trying to be efficient and started trying to be present. At first, this new way of living felt chaotic to him. Without schedules and timers, how would he know what to do? But gradually, he discovered a different kind of guidance. His body told him when to rest. His interest told him when to work. His relationships told him when a connection was needed. Life itself had a rhythm that didn't require clocks. His children noticed the change immediately. Their father would now play with them until the play naturally ended, not until a timer buzzed. He would listen to their stories without glancing at a watch. He was actually there, fully present, not counting the minutes until he could move to the next scheduled item. One evening, his daughter climbed into his lap and said, "Daddy, you're different now." "How so?" Kenji asked. "Before, you were here but not here. Now you're really here." Kenji felt tears in his eyes. "I'm learning," he said, "that being here is more important than being on time." Word spread about the clockmaker who had stopped caring about time. Some people thought he had gone mad. How could a clockmaker not care about time? But others were curious. They came to talk with him. "How do you live without schedules?" they asked. "How do you get everything done?" "I get done what needs to get done," Kenji replied. "But I've stopped confusing being busy with being productive. I've stopped measuring my worth by how efficiently I use time. Time isn't something to use or waste. It's what we live in. And I was so concerned with managing it that I forgot to inhabit it." He showed them the clocks he was making now. They were beautiful, functional, but somehow different. "These clocks can tell you what time it is," he explained, "but they can't tell you what to do with that time. They can measure duration, but not meaning. I made the mistake of letting the measurer become the master. The clock told me how to live, rather than serving my living." Joshu the monk visited Kenji's workshop months after the funeral. He watched Kenji work for a while, noticing the quality of attention the clockmaker brought to his craft, the way he would pause to watch light move across his workbench, the way he seemed fully engaged with what he was doing. "You've learned your father's final teaching," Joshu said. What teaching? That life can't be saved up or stored or perfectly managed. It can only be lived moment by moment with full presence or with partial presence. Your father's death reminded you that the time we have is uncertain, and that measuring it carefully doesn't make it last longer or mean more. Only living it fully does that. Kenji nodded. I used to think I was honoring time by tracking it so carefully. But I was actually dishonoring it. I was treating time as an enemy to be managed rather than a gift to be received. I was so afraid of wasting time that I wasted life. Years later, people still bought Kenji's clocks, but they also came to him for a different kind of wisdom. They would ask, "How do I find more time?" And he would reply, "You can't find more time. You can only be more present to the time you have. Stop measuring and start experiencing. Stop tracking and start living." The clock is useful for coordination, for knowing when to meet others, and for practical matters. But it's a terrible master. Don't let it tell you that measured time is more valuable than experienced time. Tonight, as you rest, notice if you're measuring. Are you tracking how long it takes you to fall asleep? Are you calculating how many hours of rest you'll get? Are you monitoring your progress toward relaxation? What if you stopped measuring and started experiencing? What if this moment of rest didn't need to be timed or tracked or evaluated? What if you could simply be here, in this unmeasured moment, present to breath and sensation without any concern for duration? Your life is not a clock to be wound and measured. It's an experience to be lived and felt. Tonight, forget time. Let yourself drift into timelessness, where there's no past to regret and no future to plan for. Just this eternal now that needs no measurement because it simply is. Rest in the unmeasured moment. That's where real life happens. Not in the counted minutes, but in the presence that fills them. The path of Zen unfolds like morning mist, soft and patient. In this next tale, we are invited to see, beyond appearance, into essence. Listen carefully to the next story. In a town famous for its craftsmen, there lived a clockmaker named Kenji who created timepieces of extraordinary precision. His clocks kept perfect time. His watches never gained or lost a second. People came from distant cities to purchase his work, and his reputation spread widely. But something happened to Kenji as his skill grew. He became obsessed with time in a way that began to consume his life. He would check his clocks constantly, comparing them against each other, anxious if any showed even the slightest deviation. He scheduled every moment of his day, allocating specific minutes to each task. He kept detailed records of how long everything took, analyzing his efficiency, trying to waste no time. His wife would call him for dinner, and he would arrive exactly at the scheduled moment, not a minute early or late. His children would ask him to play, and he would check his schedule, finding a 15-minute slot and setting a timer so he wouldn't run over. He measured everything, tracked everything, lived his entire life by the clock. People admired his discipline. Kenji wastes no time, they would say. He's so efficient, so organized. But his family felt differently. His wife felt like he was never really present, always watching the time, even during conversations. His children learned to stop asking him to play spontaneously, knowing he would need to check if that time was allocated. One day, Kenji's elderly father became very ill. Kenji visited him at the scheduled time each day, staying for exactly the planned duration. On what turned out to be his father's last day, Kenji was sitting beside the bed when his timer went off, indicating his visit slot was complete. "I have to go," Kenji said, standing up. "I have a client appointment in 20 minutes, and it takes 15 minutes to get there, so I need to leave now to be on time." His father looked at him with sad eyes. "Kenji, I may not be here tomorrow." "I know, father. I'll come back tomorrow at 2 p.m. as scheduled." His father died that evening, while Kenji was home eating dinner at precisely 6 p.m. as his schedule dictated. At the funeral, Kenji's father's friend, an old Zen monk named Joshu, approached him. "Your father loved you very much," Joshu said. "I know," Kenji replied. "I visited him every day." "Did you?" Joshu asked gently. "Or did you visit the time slot you had allocated for visiting?" Kenji felt something crack inside his chest. He opened his mouth to argue, but no words came. The monk was right. He had been there in body but not in presence. His mind had been on the clock, on the schedule, on the next appointment. He had measured out his love in timed portions, and now his father was gone, and all those precisely measured visits felt hollow. "I wasted it," Kenji whispered. "All that time I tracked so carefully, all that time I organized and measured, and I wasted the time that mattered." "You didn't waste it," Joshu said, "but you didn't fully live it either. You were so busy measuring time that you forgot to experience it." In his grief and shock, something shifted in Kenji. He went home and looked at all his clocks, all these devices he had spent years perfecting. They ticked away, measuring, dividing, tracking. And he realized they were measuring something that couldn't really be measured. A moment of real connection with his child had no measurable duration. The joy of a beautiful sunset didn't fit into scheduled slots. The depth of presence with another person couldn't be quantified in minutes and seconds. He had been living as if time were the most important thing, when actually what happened in time was what mattered. The next day, Kenji did something that shocked the town. He closed his clock shop. He put away his watches and timers. He stopped scheduling his days in measured blocks. His wife thought he had lost his mind. "What will we do? How will we live?" "We'll live," Kenji said simply. "Actually live. Not to measure our living. When I'm hungry, I'll eat. When I'm tired, I'll sleep. When our children want to play, I'll play. Not because it's scheduled, but because the moment calls for it." He still made clocks. It was his craft, his art, but he made them differently now. He would work on one until it felt complete, not until a timer said his work session was over. He would stop if he felt called to watch the sunset, or talk with a neighbor, or sit with his wife. He stopped trying to be efficient and started trying to be present. At first, this new way of living felt chaotic to him. Without schedules and timers, how would he know what to do? But gradually, he discovered a different kind of guidance. His body told him when to rest. His interest told him when to work. His relationships told him when a connection was needed. Life itself had a rhythm that didn't require clocks. His children noticed the change immediately. Their father would now play with them until the play naturally ended, not until a timer buzzed. He would listen to their stories without glancing at a watch. He was actually there, fully present, not counting the minutes until he could move to the next scheduled item. One evening, his daughter climbed into his lap and said, "Daddy, you're different now." "How so?" Kenji asked. "Before, you were here but not here. Now you're really here." Kenji felt tears in his eyes. "I'm learning," he said, "that being here is more important than being on time." Word spread about the clockmaker who had stopped caring about time. Some people thought he had gone mad. How could a clockmaker not care about time? But others were curious. They came to talk with him. "How do you live without schedules?" they asked. "How do you get everything done?" "I get done what needs to get done," Kenji replied. "But I've stopped confusing being busy with being productive. I've stopped measuring my worth by how efficiently I use time. Time isn't something to use or waste. It's what we live in. And I was so concerned with managing it that I forgot to inhabit it." He showed them the clocks he was making now. They were beautiful, functional, but somehow different. "These clocks can tell you what time it is," he explained, "but they can't tell you what to do with that time. They can measure duration, but not meaning. I made the mistake of letting the measurer become the master. The clock told me how to live, rather than serving my living." Joshu the monk visited Kenji's workshop months after the funeral. He watched Kenji work for a while, noticing the quality of attention the clockmaker brought to his craft, the way he would pause to watch light move across his workbench, the way he seemed fully engaged with what he was doing. "You've learned your father's final teaching," Joshu said. "What teaching?" "That life can't be saved up or stored or perfectly managed. It can only be lived moment by moment, with full presence or with partial presence. Your father's death reminded you that the time we have is uncertain, and that measuring it carefully doesn't make it last longer or mean more. Only living it fully does that." Kenji nodded. "I used to think I was honoring time by tracking it so carefully. But I was actually dishonoring it. I was treating time as an enemy to be managed rather than a gift to be received. I was so afraid of wasting time that I wasted life." Years later, people still bought Kenji's clocks, but they also came to him for a different kind of wisdom. They would ask, "How do I find more time?" And he would reply, "You can't find more time. You can only be more present to the time you have. Stop measuring and start experiencing. Stop tracking and start living." The clock is useful for coordination, for knowing when to meet others, and for practical matters. But it's a terrible master. Don't let it tell you that measured time is more valuable than experienced time. Tonight, as you rest, notice if you're measuring. Are you tracking how long it takes you to fall asleep? Are you calculating how many hours of rest you'll get? Are you monitoring your progress toward relaxation? What if you stopped measuring and started experiencing? What if this moment of rest didn't need to be timed or tracked or evaluated? What if you could simply be here, in this unmeasured moment, present to breath and sensation without any concern for duration? Your life is not a clock to be wound and measured. It's an experience to be lived and felt. Tonight, forget time. Let yourself drift into timelessness, where there's no past to regret and no future to plan for. Just this eternal now that needs no measurement because it simply is. Rest in the unmeasured moment. That's where real life happens. not in the counted minutes, but in the presence that fills them. In the hush of understanding, Zen offers us another glimpse of what it means to recognize worth not by weight or shine, but by presence. Here starts the next story. In the capital city lived a tea master named Soho, who had spent 50 years perfecting the art of the tea ceremony. His movements were flawless, his timing exact, his aesthetic sense refined beyond what most people could achieve in several lifetimes. Every detail of his ceremonies was considered and precise. The angle of the bowl, the temperature of the water, the moment to pass the tea, the positioning of each implement. Soho's ceremonies were legendary. People would wait years for an invitation to attend. Wealthy patrons offered fortunes to have Soho perform ceremonies for their guests. Other tea masters studied his techniques, trying to replicate his perfection. But Soho himself had grown troubled. Despite his technical mastery, despite the acclaim, he felt his ceremonies had become performances rather than genuine expressions of tea mind. He was so focused on executing each movement perfectly that he had lost connection to the spirit beneath the movements. His ceremonies were flawless, but somehow empty. On his 70th birthday, Soho decided to retire from public ceremonies. He would perform one final tea ceremony, a farewell to his long career, and then step away to live simply in a small temple. He prepared meticulously for this final ceremony. He invited only his closest students and a few respected elders who had followed his work for decades. He selected implements he had used for years, choosing each for its history and meaning. He practiced the movements daily in the weeks leading up to the ceremony, ensuring everything would be perfect. The day of the ceremony arrived. Soho entered the tea room with his usual grace, began with his usual precision. His guests watched in respectful silence, knowing they were witnessing a master's final performance. Then, midway through the ceremony, something unexpected happened. As Soho reached for the tea bowl, his hand trembled slightly. Whether from age, emotion, or simple nervousness, he couldn't say. The tremor caused him to fumble the bowl. It didn't fall or break, but his grip was clumsy, his movement awkward. The flow of the ceremony was disrupted by this imperfect moment. Soho's first instinct was mortification. After 50 years of perfect execution, his final ceremony was marred by a clumsy mistake. But then something shifted in him. The mistake had broken his focus on perfection, and in that break, he suddenly felt present in a way he hadn't been during a ceremony in years. He picked up the bowl, not with perfect grace, but with simple honesty, with the actual movement of an old man holding a bowl. He continued the ceremony, but something had changed. He was no longer performing perfectly. He was just making tea, sharing tea, being present with his guests. The movements that followed weren't as technically flawless as usual, but they had a quality his perfect performances had lacked. They were real. They were Soho actually being here, making tea, connecting with his guests, rather than Soho executing a perfect reproduction of the tea master role. When the ceremony ended, there was a long silence. Then one of the elder guests spoke. "That was the finest tea ceremony I have ever experienced." Soho was confused. "But I made mistakes. The execution wasn't clean." "The execution was finally clean," the elder replied. "Clean of performance, clean of ego, clean of the need to be perfect." For the first time in decades, I saw you actually making tea rather than demonstrating how tea should be made. Your fumble was the most important moment of the ceremony. It dropped you out of performance and into presence. Another guest agreed. I've attended 6 of your ceremonies over the years. They were all technically superior to today's, but this one touched me in a way the others never did. The imperfection made it human. It made it real. It made it about tea rather than about perfection. Soho sat with this feedback for a long time. He realized that his 50-year pursuit of perfect execution had taken him away from genuine expression. He had become so skilled at performing the tea ceremony that he had forgotten how to simply make tea with presence and care. I thought mastery meant perfect execution, Soho told his students later. I thought the goal was to perform each movement so exactly that no flaw could be found. But that kind of mastery is dead. It's impressive but not alive. Today, when I fumbled and had to let go of perfection, I finally rediscovered what tea ceremony is actually about. Presence, connection, the simple act of sharing tea with other humans. He looked at his hands, still slightly trembling. These old hands that made a mistake taught me more than 50 years of perfect practice. They taught me that perfect execution becomes perfect only when you stop trying to perfect it, when you let go of performance and sink into presence. One student asked, "So should we not practice? Should we not work toward technical excellence?" "Practice," Soho replied. "Develop your technique. But don't let technique become an end in itself. Practice until the movements are natural, then let go of trying to perform them perfectly. Use your technique to support presence, not to replace it. Master the form so completely that you can forget the form and just be here, making tea." He picked up a tea bowl, holding it with the same slight tremble. "See this imperfection? This is actually perfection because it's real. It's an old man's hand actually holding a bowl. The steady, flawless grip I cultivated for decades was impressive, but it was also a kind of lie it hid my actual hand behind a perfect performance. This trembling hand is honest, and honesty is more important than perfection." In the weeks following his final ceremony, Soho began making tea in a completely different way. He still had all his technical skills, all his aesthetic sensitivity, but he used them lightly, allowing imperfection, welcoming the unexpected, staying present with what was actually happening rather than executing a mental script. He made tea for strangers, for children, for anyone who wanted to share a bowl. These weren't formal ceremonies with guests and perfect settings. They were just tea, made with care, shared with presence. And people felt more touched by these simple offerings than they had by his legendary perfect ceremonies. "You've become a greater tea master by letting go of mastery," one visitor observed. "I've become an actual tea master by letting go of the performance of mastery," Soho clarified. "I was skilled before, but I wasn't real. Now I'm both skilled and real. The skill supports the reality rather than replacing it. That's the difference." A young tea student struggling to perfect his own technique asked Soho for guidance. "How do I know when my practice is good enough? When can I stop trying to perfect my movements? When perfection becomes a barrier rather than a path," Soho replied. "Practice until the movements are natural and trustworthy. Then let go of trying to make them perfect and just let them be. The movement from practice to performance to presence, that's the journey. Most people stop at performance, endlessly perfecting their execution. The final step is letting go of perfection and discovering presence. He made tea for the young student, his hands moving with practiced skill, but also with slight tremors, small imperfections, human reality. See how I make tea now? I'm not performing or demonstrating, I'm just making tea. The years of practice allow me to do it well, but letting go of perfection allows me to do it truly. Both are necessary, but the second is what makes it complete. Tonight, as you rest, you might consider what you've been perfecting, performing, trying to execute flawlessly. What would happen if you let your hands tremble slightly? If you allowed imperfection? If you stopped performing mastery and just did the thing itself, present and real? Perfect execution is impressive, but presence is what actually connects, what actually matters, what actually makes any practice complete. You've practiced enough, you've refined enough. Now it's time to let go of perfection and discover what's on the other side. Not sloppiness, not carelessness, but genuine presence that includes both skill and imperfection, both mastery and humanity. Rest now in this completion. Let yourself fumble slightly. Let yourself be real rather than perfect. The Tea Master's Last Cup teaches that the journey ends not in flawless execution, but in authentic presence. You've arrived, not at perfection, but at something better, yourself, skilled and real, doing what you do with care and presence, and the slight tremble of actual human hands. That's perfection. That's the completion. That's the teaching. Sleep now, no longer performing, just being. This is enough. You are enough. The perfect becomes perfect when you stop trying to perfect it. As the lantern of awareness glows a little brighter, we come to a tale about seeing with more than the eyes. Let the stillness guide you now, and listen carefully to the next story.